Welcome to the Owens Valley. We call it Paiute, place of warming water. Reason why we call it that is we have ancient irrigation ditches all through up in the valley from Lone Pine above the Alabama Hills all the way to Rock Creek up here going to Sherwin Grade. And there's also ancient irrigation ditches in Lundy Canyon and Eureka Valley. And we've always known about water, and that's what you guys are studying, water. We've been had these ditches for over 1,000 years. I did one report, but then I've been in many documentaries and other stuff, and I've been studying water. I was on the Owens Valley Committee until last year, and we fought against LA Department of Water and Power, so I've really studied about this area. And I've been going to Berkeley, talking to their about water in the West in their American Cultures class. So I'm very versed on water and about this valley and our history because I've had to learn. And since 1991, when the long-term water agreement was being negotiated, the tribes got involved because they forgot all about us. In the 1930s, well, let me start. Okay, the ancient irrigation ditches. We've been here, archaeological studies over 15,000 years in this valley. But we also, on China Lake, I'm also an archaeological technician. We found a 22,000-year-old artifact. And they also say there was some petroglyphs that were over 43,000 years old. People dispute them, but when I first seen them, I looked at them and I went, God, how old are these? And the archaeologist that was for the base just straight away said, you know, some professor did a study and they're 43,000 years old. But if you say that to another archaeologist, they go, no, it ain't. And then we were down to the Matarango Museum, and I was looking at a book about petroglyphs, and it straight off says somebody's maybe over 40,000 years old. So I raced back to the archaeologist, look. See, you want to believe me. And a lot of times that's the way it is. But on the ancient ditches, I'm pretty much the expert, because I went out and walked them. I found, I re-investigated them. Over the years, there's been many studies. Philip Wilkie, Mary D. Decker, these guys did studies on them, and we always knew about them, but then in time they were erased from everybody's memory. Because when LA Department of Water and Power came here in like 1900, they first came here in 1895 because they knew all this water, and that's when they had the dreams of growing LA. But the first white contact we had was in 1856, 55 and 56. That's documented. And that was Alex von Smith. He was a surveyor for the federal government. He did the California-Nevada border. He came through this area doing townships, 5-mile squares. And I've held his little journal in my hand. It's all this material's in Berkeley. And when I deal with Berkeley, some of the students are like little librarians. They went in and found all these journals and all this stuff. They started studying us. And Berkeley had kept all this material. So I was able, in the long run, learn more and more. And then all these journals in 1930s that this guy named Holtz came through here, hired Indians that could read and write fluent, or read and write English and speak fluent Paiute. He hired them and sent them out to his families to collect journals in history. And I've had chances, there's like 63 journals up there that we could look through now. And some people knew about them, but not everybody did. But I've had the chance to hold my grandfather's writing. But like in 2000, or let's say 1900, 1901, Mulholland, what was his name? Eaton and Lippincott, they were in this area. And Lippincott was supposed to be working for the Reclamations Department. And they did all kinds of studies with the tribes. They were going to make a 73,000 acre reservation on top of the tablelands up there. But once LA took interest, all that stuff, they just dropped it because LA with their political power. And what they did was some of the tribes by then was what's called Sherwin Lake or Sherwin Grade and Crawley Lake. That was Father Crawley. He was a padre, a Catholic missionary. He seen the plight of the Indians when the first settlers came here was they started going to war for us. The first guy was Samuel Bishop. I don't even know, I used to play on his foundation of his house when I was a little kid, and then ripping it apart because they didn't want no sign of any history. DWP has done some really dastardly, I call them an evil empire several times. Because what they did was like erase my history. They just erased things because if it's not documented, it never was there. And that's the way they still do today. They threaten our little county because of the long-term water agreement in 1991. They've done all kinds of stuff over the years. So the politics of this area about water, I always call it a microcosm to the rest of the world. How when people study as to how, when I was on Owens Valley Committee, they come in and study as to how'd you guys fight LA off? And other people, like cities would come in, like Las Vegas. How did you get the water? How did you go get the water? And they send in people, when they're really fighting for it, some of the local ranchers would not sell. And they'd threaten them, literally just threaten them. They'd send in little families with, little families, mother, father, a couple kids, and say, oh, we're just gonna buy this land and have a ranch. They didn't, they were working for DWP. They lied, cheated, stole. I used to have a friend, Stan Malik, his one of the original settlers, he had like a 400-acre assignment. He was always proud that his father held a gun to him. Get off my land, pulled out a shotgun and said, get out of here. Some people's held on to their land, but basically you see in this valley, they own 95% of everything. What you see built on is basically private land or DWP lease. All of our parks are dumped. Everything you see is leased from DWP. So this last year, they're kind of holding us blackmail. They threatened to raise the lease on the dump. They always do that to our county, so our county just rolls over and gets rubbed like a dog and wags its tail. They can't really do much. Even the long-term water agreement, and our water department is budgeted, a $2 million budget is paid by DWP. And if we go to court for anything in a long-term water agreement, it's $32,000 just to go to court. Because if you disagree in the long-term water agreement, you have mitigations, they'll do a dispute resolution, but the Inyo County never been to court. When I was on the Owens Valley Committee, we sued DWP for the long-term water agreement, or the LORP, and the judge got mad at us. He goes, when you guys signed on to be a signatory for the Lawrence River project, he goes, it was your responsibility when they weren't implemented and to do it. And he goes, he looked at DWP and went, you know what, you haven't done anything in 11 years. They kept making mistakes or just kept lying. Oh, well, we can't do it, don't have money. Always an excuse. And then when we sued, we were happy. I was sitting in the courtroom and then Judge Cooper just goes, he balled us out on the Valley Committee for taking so long. And then he looked at DWP and said, you finish it by November or we're shutting the second aqueduct down. And that was the biggest cause in the 70s with the second aqueduct. When they did that, they literally started pumping. And if you guys read about the long-term water agreement.
No, they haven't.
Okay, and then there's the Hillside Decree and the Chandler Decree. Those were done like in the 1920s, and I think the Chandler was in the 30s. But the local people, right when DWP came in here, in the Bishop area, they pumped over 200,000 acre feet of water that one year. And the local ranchers just seen the water table drop. And so they sued in our local court. It's called a Hillside Decree because there's a ditch. It's called a Hillside Ditch. And what that means is anything west of the Owens River is only to be pumped for in-valley use. Well, today they just use it, that's just a loose term. They're already planned on to put in 2 wells this year. They already got the contract, just went through a technical group 2 weeks ago. I was at that meeting, and I always give them hell. They don't even like me, but I don't care. I look at this as my homeland. We got to fight for it. I went and found, when I started reading and looking for those Indian ditches, I go up on the alluvial fans and look around and go, man, everything was green from here. Now it's all dry and gray. So when they pump the water out of here, they also pump the life and the color. Have you guys been down the pink building and seen that mural? It's right on West Line across from the courthouse. Kind of. There's a pink building, and on the east side of the building there's a mural. And in that mural, it's a good description there. There's a well. It's got all these apple orchards and real green area. Then in the middle, it's got this well, and it's all gray around it. And that's what they basically did. They sucked the water and life, sent it to LA. And LA has free water. They don't try, this last couple of years, tried to say that, we're gonna stop our import of water, but they weren't accounting in the water from the Owens Valley. They were just saying, no, we're gonna try to bring less water from the Colorado River and the California Delta. And they just kind of, but they would never say, well, the water from the Owens Valley is imported, 200, 300 miles. It's a lot of water they've taken out here. In 1937, Act of Congress gave them the rights to the runoff of the Eastern Sierras and also to the towns and cities of California. But they have a monopoly. No towns and cities of California gain any, they don't get to use that water because LA, unless they buy it from LA. So they basically have a monopoly. That's why they added the words towns and cities of California to that bill in Congress. Because they were not supposed to create a monopoly, but they basically have a monopoly. They hold Inyo County. Us tribes are the only one that really try to fight them, but they won't deal with our land and our water claims either. They really try to deny that we had ancient irrigation ditches. But when I started studying it, about 3 years ago, the Department of Water Resources came through here telling us about the Ground Sustainability Act. You guys know about the Ground Sustainability Act?
No.
3 years ago, because of the drought, and on the other side of the San Joaquin Valley, they were pumping so much damn water that the subsidence, you guys know what subsidence is? Okay, the ground drops. But the bad thing about subsidence is it compresses the ground to where the water was, and water will never penetrate that ground again. They turn it into like rock. And so the bad thing about that, on the other side, I was working on a job doing some cultural monitors up the road here about 5 miles for SCE, and the drillers, it took them forever because that driller had to come from the San Joaquin Valley. And I was asking him, how deep a well is it? He goes, we're going over 5,000 acre feet, 5,000 feet down to drill fresh water. Well, the bad thing about that is when you do that, those are ancient aquifers that were filled up, we don't know how long ago, people say 20, 30,000 years ago, but when's they ever going to be filled up again? And man thinks he's so powerful that he can control nature. Look what happened with these rains. And then about 5 or 6 or 3 or 4 years ago in Bakersfield, they had a meeting because in 1872 or 73, it rained for 30 days straight and it rained 20 feet of water. They were asking, what would we do today if that happened? Because they just said from down there all the way to Sacramento, it would fill the entire whole San Joaquin Valley. There was no control in it. So they're kind of looking at it today. When this happened, I know they're thinking about that. Because we also have the ancient bristlecone pine trees up in the mountains. And their tree rings, they can go about, I think, 16,000 years on them. But in that time, they've had 5, 8, 45, 75, 85. And then they also had a 200-year drought at one time. And those rings talk about this stuff. So we only had a 4-year drought. What would we do? And then our last drought was an 8-year drought. But this last 4-year drought, everybody went crazy. They think that water is just, they got all the water in the world. Mother Nature didn't say that. She can be here. She'll be here when we're gone. Did you guys ever see that little documentary that was it Julia Roberts did?
Yeah, on conservation.org.
Or just talk, she was Mother Earth.
Mother Earth, yeah.
I'm Mother Earth, and I've been here for 4.5 billion years. You guys have been here a speck of time. And how we treat it is something else. 2 weeks ago, I was in Berkeley, and I go over there still, and I was talking to a class, and it was kind of sad and telling, because Mulholland, his family was always, we look at him, if they come up and said your name was Mulholland, you guys still look at him as an enemy, even though he didn't gain any money or anything off it, like Eaton and Lippincott did, because they bought all the land up in San Fernando valleys, and once they knew they had this excess money, excess land, they just started selling it and making money. Well, Mulholland, I wondered, because I got invited up to Berkeley to speak to engineering class one time about morality in engineering. Are you just going to be a beaver and build and build and build and destroy everything, or are you going to... And then I looked at it as, okay, I will talk about Mulholland, and then I also talk about the people who built the atomic bomb, Did they really know what they were doing? Would they have been part of it if they knew what they're doing? Because when they was making an atomic bomb, there were just different sections on that bomb. And those guys didn't get to talk what they're building. They were just building, let's say, a trigger or some kind of mechanism. They're just being scientists. Because most scientists are engineers. They just want to build something that nobody's ever done. Like going to the moon. Look at all the stuff that they gained off it. Teflon and all these other materials. And, you know, when you do stuff like that, do you really know what the consequences are? And I always looked at it, what's your guys, that's your generation. I'm 60. I ain't got that much longer, but you know, I like talking to you guys. But the impact I've had on many of the kids up in Berkeley, my professor, that's why they keep taking me up there. I say stuff that most people don't even think about. But this last time, this one girl, her grandfather was in India. He was an engineer or whatever. He built a dam, but he displaced 11 million people. So she felt that guilt like Mulholland's granddaughter did. She was kind of like, she was shaking. The only person she'd ever told was a professor, but we had a round table after taking and meeting a bunch of us tribal historical preservation officers who I took over. And the thoughts of those are just great. You know, where are you guys going to be in life? What's your quality of life going to be? You know, our biggest problem is overpopulation. And I look at it as religions too, because some religions say, hey, just go forth and populate. And water is the basis of all life. Without water, we wouldn't have it. You know, there's a few things that live. As they discovered in Mono Lake, there was one thing that lived in arsenic. And it was amazing. It was just like, you know, this little being, so things could live from different worlds. And you know, like when 4 billion years ago, what did this place look like? Still Mother Earth. We weren't here, but we evolved. So life is just, when you talk about water and how important it is, where it comes from, myself, I look at it as, I like to know where I came from to know where I'm going. And the more I learn about my past, the more I pass on to our students or Indian people, because they didn't know about these ditches. They didn't know about our history. We were always taught that you guys were Stone Age. You guys didn't have any past. And then more and more I started learning, and then it's other archaeologists, I just straight off told her, the more and more I learn about my people, the more and more I realized they were way more sophisticated than you could think of. And she goes, same thing, I always do that. Because we live basically just out here. You can see some of the housing on those little things. They're called Tonys. But being an archaeological technician, and I've been on digs. And sometimes those things are 5 meters across, 15, you know, from that table to there. And they're in circles. And it's just interesting on digs sometimes I get to see stuff that they were not dumb people. They were, and then especially when you get those irrigation ditches, because people would go, oh, they just followed the down gradient. And I said, what about the ones that went sideways? They were kind of going, what do you mean? Because they always think, oh, they just followed ravines. And so then I started, because at one point we were above, it's called Rocking Cay up here. I'm a quarter mile from my nephew. He's at the other end, and I think goes in the valley like that. And I go, I said, he's level with me. Because when I started first investigating him, I got a lot of questions. How do you identify him? How do you do this and how do you do that? What's the difference between a white guy digging him and an Indian? I said, every time there was a little gully, I don't care if it was just this wide of the building, they went all the way into the end and came back. But we always have reports they used a pavado. It was a mahogany pole, and it was harder than hell. I went and made one. I had an axe. I was chopping. I was like, how the hell they chopped this thing? 'Cause my axe took me 10 minutes to go through a log this big. And I kept thinking, I'd ask the other guys, they probably use obsidian. I said, obsidian's too damn brittle. Then when I gave a bunch of these legends to the cultural center here, one of the guys was reading one. He goes, Harry, they burned them. He asked me, how did they do it? And he goes, I don't know. I said, I told him a story about using an axe. He goes, Harry, I read that they burned them. I said, oh, that would work. Because I kind of went, when I was chopping it down, I was like, damn, that thing would spring back. He said, yeah, they just, one of those stories, they started a fire at the end, but it also would temper mahogany, because that stuff was harder than hell. And then the one I did, I'd use it like a crowbar. And it was like a crowbar, it hit the ground. And then I also read about one of the militia captains that was staying at Samuel Bishop's place. he was so amazed at the perseverance of the tribes. They would just sit there and dig, and the other guys have baskets and stuff, and he would just slowly just pick away. Maybe make 20 feet a day, but they kept working. But Teveju, it's one of the young guys mentioned, we had a democracy. We lived in bands of Indians. In the Owens Valley, we had 5 different dialects of language too, the Paiute. Down you go to Lone Pine, there was Shoshone. But in the Bishop area, we had 3 different dialects. And that's, I was talking to one of my friends, he's another architect, he goes, that's how you can tell how long you've been in the area. Because they could tell by, when I say kata, I mean sit. Little north by Mono Lake, they say katu. Out there, and their language was like, I call myself Numa, they'd say Numu. But those little set changes in dialect would tell you what part of the valley you're from. And that was a way of kind of like keeping incest away too, because we also, the Paiutes were way different. We knew about incest and stuff like that, deformities in kids. So you couldn't mess around with anybody that was over 7 relations or cousins close to you. So we have a lot of legends of guys going all around Beatty, or we have legends of going to Yosemite, you know, and that's where you look for a mate. And then you brought them home or whatever. But it was just an interesting way of life for us. And if you ever see the documentary Paiute, I go, it was a simple, but probably a beautiful and tough life. Because when think about all the places you guys come from icy areas to, tropics or wherever, you all adapt. The human body is a fantastic thing. It adapts. Cold or whatever. I have some friends that they're from Nome, Alaska. And when it got to about 10 degrees, that girl told me, her brother went around t-shirt. He said it was hot. And I was going like, damn, but he ate a lot of food. She said, every time he come to the house, he'd eat his out because he burned so much energy. And he was heavy and thick. Their bodies are built different. And then you go to Africa, people are long, lean, and they know how to, save energy and perspire. My people being in the mountains, I get described by one friend, we were short, strong legs and real long arms because we were strong. And when they really got heavy now was our repatriation. That means we went to Berkeley. That's why I first went there, was to bring some bodies that we have over there and bring them home and to bury them. But then the archaeologist I was working with, I had him get me the reports that kept us from bringing the bones home. And Robert Bettinger from Davis and a couple other guys. And I read the reports, all I could do was argue with them. But then we also had one little lady that worked in our environmental department. She used to be in the Rand Corporation. She was a pure genius. I asked her, how smart are you? She'd always get mad at me. She said, just think of this, Harry. When I was 14, my IQ was 174. I went, gee! I always tease her. But she was somebody that I gave those reports to. I said, please decipher them for me. And she did. I was just like, that's why I learned about halogroups. And it's kind of like, damn, she's a smart little woman. But she had all that knowledge, but she was like a computer. I could ask her anything, and she would come back sometimes with the most simplest answers. And in my archaeological studies, everybody with all these big old degrees, masters in archaeology, they come out with the most complex answers when we're out doing survey stuff, and I just come over and say, it's just simple. You don't have to, make it so hard. Sometimes things are just a simple way. You just looked at it. And growing up around here, kind of like always walking around the wilderness looking for my stuff, looking for our stuff, they're simple answers. They aren't really that complicated, unless you want to make them complicated. And then I just used to laugh around because they were talking about, ethnocentrism. And the other guy was explaining to the other archaeologist what it was, your culture trying to describe another culture's attitude about something. And I was standing there listening, and I said, and that's why I'm here. They were like, oh, because they made it all difficult. But that one guy loved him describing an arrowhead because he did it in so much detail that if you're a scientist sitting in a laboratory, you'd know exactly what he's doing. I just call it a biface. It's got fluid tips and all this stuff. He'd go down to all this other fancy stuff, and I'd sit there going, I don't know what he's saying, but damn, it sounds good. And then we'd find some stuff, and I'd say, I wish Gene was here. I'd like to hear him describe what this thing is. But that, smarts is good. Intelligent is good, but smart is using the intelligence you have to get what you need. And there's one word in English language that's called ingenious. That came from what was called Indian genius. When they first made that word up, when the first people ever came here, they looked at the Indians. You're a genius to be able, you don't have steel, you don't have all this stuff, but you still have product. Learn to survive, learn about all the plants and roots in your area. And as you came in, you could see a lot of the plants and stuff like that. But that all depended on water. And what we did when we spread our irrigation ditches was to spread water. It wasn't in the modern day style. It's like, I got a garden over there, I'm just shooting as fast as I can because I don't want no loss. We looked at it as everything is paradise, everything is water. We were trying to water seed plants, sunflower seeds, all kind of little seeds. Now, tapusi, that's the nutgrass. Every ancient civilization has these nutgrasses. But that's what we did, and that's why and then I started realizing a lot of their whole thought was not to get water to one area, but was to water the entire area. So when the first cattle guys, or Samuel Bishop and Captain Davidson in 1859 came here, they looked at this place as a water resource because we had spread. And like Captain David said, the natives have made this place bloom like a rose because every alluvial fan from Lone Pine all the way up here had ancient ditches all over them. And they were so flat that the water sunk into the ground. They weren't just going fast. And that just made the whole area green. So when DWP come in here, they just looked at us. We could take this paradise and move it south. And that's what they did. So that's one thing I caution, people call it civilization, I don't. And uncivil about civilization. They just conquer people, and that's why I look at DWP. We're just a colonial resource to them, a water resource. We're worth money to create jobs. That's why I hate capitalism sometimes. Everybody used to want to be a millionaire. Now they want to be a billionaire. But you need customers. When Reagan was in, he allowed like 10 million immigrants, gave him, okay, you can stay here. Because the other guy said, we need customers. We got 10 million more customers right there. And that's what they did. And now they're complaining about too much immigration because they're taking our jobs. Well, send all the jobs overseas. And now they all want to raise they know what capitalism is about. Now everybody wants a TV. Everybody wants a ATV. And then I was telling one of the guys earlier, what's your American dream mean to you guys? I said, you know what it means to me? The whole world came here at a point as immigrants. Killed us off, you had free land. That's what American dream means to me. So I'm not happy with it. It's just scary that the world is turning this way. And now one day it'll be fighting over water. Or in capitalists said, oh no, you can always buy it from me. Plastic bottles and it's oil, refined from oil byproducts and stuff. It's just, you have to look at the world in a different way. And if you're going to be environmentalists, you have to look at the world like that. What's the quality of life that you guys want for yourselves and your grandkids? I know what I want, and that's why I speak to a lot of kids. I got to influence you guys to say, hey, slow down a little bit. Because in the 90s, when everybody could get loans and stuff like that, around here, everybody had quads. Next thing you know, our mountains are just getting torn up. Everybody wanted to be the top of that hill. And that was just like, oh, get all mad. And then us environmentalists tried to do the wilderness programs. Then everybody's yelling and screaming at us. One day we had like 500 people at a meeting talking about wilderness. And that morning I had just talked to the tribal chairman. And I told him, I'm in favor of the wilderness. The plants and animals, they need places where people just can't go in and destroy them. And the deer need to run out there and hide. It doesn't stop the man from walking in. He can walk in or ride horse. But nobody wants to do it. It's not convenient. And one guy said, well, my boy's in a wheelchair. How can he get to this place? I said, then I had to think. I didn't tell him, but I said, not everybody can go every place. That's just nature. If he's not capable of walking himself, I'm sorry. Get him a horse. But everybody says, oh, I want a four-wheeler and I want to do this. Well, you're destroying the world. I'm kind of happy that Governor Brown's there because I'm also on the California EPA Indian Advisory Committee. I'm supposed to go to Tuolumne on Monday, but I don't know if I'm gonna make it, because they shut down 88 going to Kirkwood. I have to go to Tahoe and come all the way back. Sonora Pass is closed, which really just leads right to it. But I'm not sure if I'm gonna go, because I don't know about this storm. So I'm also on the Department of Water Resources Indian Advisory Committee. Those directors do not like me sometimes. Because like I told them, I said, I'm used to dealing with Department of Water and Power. I've been faced with stuff that you guys probably never will be faced with, but I have. So when the Department of Water Resources first came here, me and Sally Manning, another lady from Big Pine, they started taking notes on us. I said, why are you guys taking notes? Because nobody ever asks us questions like you guys. We're used to dealing with DWP that pulls every dirty trick in the book, that I have to come up with answers, or we sit around, me and Sally and some other guys, and talk about how do you fight against them, how do you fight against them. And we just do, we just kind of made it our life's goal. This is what I do, and I enjoy doing it. And now Emma wants to take you down to the coastal. It was because of the ancient pupfish too, because basically we only had 3 or 4 different types of fish here. The pupfish, a couple suckers, and the speckled dace. And all the trout and everything was introduced in the 1870s and 80s and the 1900s. They started bringing bass in. But then they ate up all the pupfish, because the pupfish are little mean little guys. They think they've got that little man's attitude. They were going to go fight with these big guys, and the big guys just eat them. Fattened up the fish. But in the 60s, Phil Peaster, he found them. Just 2 bucket loads out in Fish Slough. That's all there were left of them. But people have spread them slightly, certain springs that regular trout can't be in. And they even ended up by okay. Okay, that's all right. No, but those little fish are, that's why I have to argue against my own people why we went for making these fish ponds. They helped us to live. Because when we did the ancient ditches, what we would do is we would rotate north or south side of Bishop Creek. We would dry them up, and then we'd go and collect all the fish. And because the ground was so watered, the groundwater table was high because we kept watering it. And then we collect the fish, you grind them up and save them for winter. And we just made this place bloom. Every place you can go on the outside, you'll see it's all gray and dead, but at one time it wasn't. I've also seen Southern California Edison plot books where they showed the land they bought, like over to West Bishop, and they had farms and stuff where they had wheat fields, peach trees, apple orchards, and now they're just completely dead because they just kind of like cut off all the ancient ditches and consolidate everything into the creeks to get out of it as fast as possible. So that's what I worry about, just man's treatment of man and treatment of the environment. You know, if you care about these things, you want to bring your grandkids or kids to places like that, you have to save them. And everybody thinks, you know, solar's all right. We fought against bringing solar down here across the Manzanar because it was all undisturbed land. DWP says, my land, and just put 4,000 acres of solar out there. But we are in a tourist trap, and one of our biggest economic is tourism. Nobody wants to climb to a mountain and go and see big old 4,000 acre solar panels. You know, I used to try to tell our local politicians, advertise that we don't have these big industrial streets. I look at it, if you want solar, put it on existing or disturbed land. And now they've discovered Tesla, they put it on rooftop shingles, all these stuff. I flew over LA one time and I looked at how big those damn warehouses are and stuff. I said, you put solar on that, you click. And now they put it on roads, you put it on everything. Cover up the damn aqueduct. People, I keep on electricity and solar on each other. I said, they're doing it in India. And so we had to show them the papers that they're doing that because there are so many people and so little land. So things like that are just common sense things. If you're already destroyed there, don't go out in a place that's never been destroyed or never had human impact. Just because it looks like a desert doesn't mean there ain't life out there. There's a lot of life underneath the ground at night time when you're in the desert. We used to go party at places and no more. The trees are dead. We used to call this place called a forest. Now it's a forest that's dead standing. But so enjoy our area. We are in a special place. That's why we call it Paiute, the place of the flowing water. And a lot of times I go to, when I take people out on some of those tours, I show, could you imagine this right from here? all being green as far as you can see. And it's a neat thing when you look at time, just like where you were at. What did it look like 100 years ago? What did it look like 1,000 years ago? What did it look like when the Ice Age was here? Valley at one point was full of glaciers. The mountains are full of glaciers. And when I studied at this one place, or we were working up there, I was asking, says, why are there so many rocks? I said, is this glacial moraine or glacier just dropped off? He says, no, there's probably an ice dam. Pushes the cold in the ground. Because the glaciers and everything was so big, and then when the ice dam broke, it took all the rocks and everything and just dumped it. Just like the floods in LA are happening. Just, we're talking massive, massive amounts of water moving. So, you got to look at time too. And what's this place going to look like 100 years? I'm not worried about 20 would be. And there's so much new technology. I also have a friend, my fiance of the lady that did the Paiute documentary. He just did forward osmosis. There's reverse osmosis. Forward osmosis was developed by a guy in the 1930s. So they're redoing it. There's other people, it's not all about desalinization. I look at things as recycling. You guys' generation is going to have to get over looking at things from toilet to tap. Shit, they can make water so clean that it tastes bad. They got to add minerals to make it taste good. Yeah. And enjoy our water, you could literally bottle it. I thought about saying that to the tribe, but they get all mad at me. Bottle a damn thing. When I travel with a couple of gallons, because I don't want to buy water. I got it at my house. It's even better than some of the water I buy. So enjoy it while it's here.
Cheers.
Have a good day.